talking to you. Sorry. So, this part of the morning is usually a talk, and I just wanted to talk. I wanted to talk a little bit, but also be quite practical. And the theme for this year is the spiritual community, or Sangha. And different people have been approaching that in very different ways all through the year. And I thought of an approach I wanted to take. So I want to enter into this approach, first of all, by giving a very short biography of myself, how I got into meditation and Buddhism. It's not going to be long, and some of you will have heard it, perhaps. So I had been traveling in Sri Lanka, Thailand, and became familiar with that sort of what you call Theravadan Buddhism. And it didn't really appeal to me, to be honest. So I went to Japan for nearly a year into a Zen precinct and did a lot of meditation and learnt nothing in a conceptual sense, but I had lots of experience of meditation, which made me realize that at least I wanted to carry on meditating. And then I came back to London and actually got involved with a Theravadan teacher from Thailand and got more into the early Buddhist psychology, which I found quite interesting but a bit dry. And then quite soon after that, I got involved with Triratna, which is this movement. And I was very struck by something that the founder said. His name was Sangharakshita, we called him Bhante. Something that Bhante said early on was that he had founded this movement, this Western Buddhist movement, with an eye to it being a school or a theme of Buddhism called the Mahayana, centrally. And a central theme of the Mahayana is the Bodhisattva ideal. And I'm not going to give much of a description of what the Bodhisattva ideal is, but basically, very simply put, it's that you take on your growth and development and efforts, not just for your own benefit, but for everybody. So you're not just aiming for your enlightenment, but you're aiming for everyone's enlightenment. And I have to say that that approach appealed to me immediately. He said it. I thought it made sense to me. And he talked about an image which he felt was an archetypal image, a symbolic image, which communicated the spirit of the Bodhisattva ideal, which is the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara. Now, we've only got a 4-armed one here. So there's all the rest of the arms are missing. But basically, he said that the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara is like the order, the Triratna order, and the people involved in Triratna. Everyone is an arm. So Jenny is quite small, so you might not see it very well. But the iconography of 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara is very, very common all through the Buddhist world. And he said that there's different ways of seeing it, And one of the ways of seeing it is that it's us, that we are or become an arm of Avalokiteshvara who expresses compassion and wisdom in the world to all beings. So we are individual, and we all have our strengths in our practice and the way that we practice. And I think this idea that as we individually grow and develop, we are expressing in the community and in the world our particular progress, you could say, our clarity of mind, our kindness, our patience, our ability to communicate clearly about the Dharma. And I think it's useful to see ourselves as progress, not just a finished arm, as it were, but that we're learning and progressing and developing through our lives in our personal abilities to be clearer and wiser and less deluded, but also in terms of our communication and our ability to relate to people and to listen to people and to have empathy with people improves over time. And that what that means is that Sangha, or the spiritual community, as a whole, becomes an expression of the wisdom and compassion of Avalokiteshvara, 1,000-arm Avalokiteshvara. So that's my token referencing of talking about spiritual community. Now I've wanted to, in a way, get more practical. Each of the arms of the Bodhisattva, the archetype of Bodhisattva, is holding different things. But one of the ways of approaching this is they're all things which help you grow and develop, or help other people grow and develop. And I just want to pick a couple of things. So one of the arms is holding a mirror. And there is something in Buddhism called the mirror-like wisdom. And when I first heard about this, and the way that I heard it was that when something passes in front of the mirror doesn't hold on to it. It's sort of non-stick, you could say, experience. And also that reflects in a way a kind of awareness and mental state that is very open and unfixed. You could even say, getting a little bit more gritty with it, unopinionated, where you just see things and you don't go off on one about ideas about what it is. You just experience it quite openly and directly. There's another way in which the mirror is quite important, which is that it's not only non-stick, but it doesn't distort. I know that we have distorting mirrors, but that isn't what is meant here. A mirror that is actually almost perfect in the way that it takes in what's happening. So this refers to a kind of awareness in which we hear things, see things, think about things without putting our own slant on it immediately, our own interpretation, our own bias, you could even say. And so part of the process of becoming self-aware is to notice your biases one way or another. I mean, a very simple, I keep using that word and then I realize it's never simple, is the pessimistic, optimistic, realistic angle of things, where you see things and you go, oh, well, it's all going to end in tears, or it'll all be all right in the end, being more positive and optimistic, or more practical, well, it's not good at the moment, but if we really apply ourselves, then things can change for the better if we stay with it. So part of the practice of meditation and mindfulness, as much as possible, is to be aware of your bias in this way, being just, oh well, it's all terrible. I mean, I live with 5 others, and there's one. You say, well, what do you expect? It's bound to go wrong. And I was like, no, you can't just say that straight off without looking at it a little bit more clearly. You know? And I think by temperament, I'm on the opposite side, and I've had to modify it a bit, which is, oh, it'll be fine, which, no, isn't really very accurate either. But I think this middle way approach is, well, the situation has some very positive things and some very difficult things, which are very unhelpful and even toxic. But if we apply ourselves to this in a clear way, sensible way, intelligent, with kindness, we can find a way to make things better and improve, both in the world and within ourselves and in the community. So the mirror is one thing that is held as clarity of intention. And next one sounds a bit brutal. It's a chopper. I think that when I first saw that arm holding the chopper, I just unconsciously cut off from it. I didn't actually want to see it, you know. I just sort of blanked it out. Because I thought, oh, that's too brutal. But actually, I began, over time, began to see that it was representative of something which could be put more subtly, but also in a way quite direct, which is the scalpel. You know, you're cutting away, consciously cutting away things which are really harmful to you, which are very negative patterns, and you're seeing through them and letting go of them is an expression of the chopper or the scalpel, or you could say, you know, the sword is another way of rather martial expression. But what it's getting at is that you develop over time an understanding of your attitudes and emotions that cause you suffering or cause other people suffering. Now, this process of noticing what causes you and other people suffering, I think, is a long-term process. And it needs to be engaged in, I think, with patience and kindness. You know, it might be something relatively not very strong. You might have a tendency to be over-controlling with others. I'm not looking at anyone particularly. But, you know, it can be very stultifying to creativity and communication when you're always just telling people, you know, what to do and or even more subtly controlling and directing. So you see, I'm just using a relatively benign expression here, but you notice it. Oh, I do that. And how can I let go of that? And how can I stop just falling into that tendency unconsciously? So you bring to bear a sort of radar, you could say, of these tendencies which you have, which you decide for yourself are not helpful to you or others. And sometimes it gets, it can be quite double-edged, you know, like, here's a double-edged one. We know that it's good to be kind and helpful and supportive. But there can be an unhelpful side to it, which some people have and need to look at, which is, I think, a phrase which covers it very well is over-concern for the welfare of others. So this over-concern is, I think, was quite well expressed once in the community with someone who doesn't live in the community anymore. I was coming in the front door and I could see through the front window a community member. He was right at the back of the house. And I had my key out and I saw him running through the house, through the door, and I had my key in the lock, and he was trying to be helpful, and he opened the door and almost pulled my arm out of his socket. So he was saying, he was like really pleased with himself, and I was going, no. It wasn't necessary. I'm quite capable of opening a door on my own. But it's just an example of, you can have a positive quality to be kind and helpful and considerate, but somehow or another it doesn't, you don't take in the actual situation. It's just a bit blind. So this is just another example of double-edged things. So another thing is honesty. We know that to be honest is quite a good thing, but it can be used like a cudgel on people. I have a very dear friend, we've been friends for a very, very long time, who's Dutch. And she'll say something, and I say, that was a bit harsh. And she said, no, I was just being honest. And I thought, no, you weren't being honest, you were getting at me. So one has to be careful that one's honesty and saying things to somebody doesn't become a weapon, actually. Like a chopper or a cudgel or something, or a pea shooter. So it gets very interesting to learn about yourself and to have this approach of, well, I just call it scalpel, actually, just sort of being clear what areas are really not serving you or others in your growth and development, in your development as a meditator. Like, you know, I'd be someone who thinks that it's fine just to go hard into everything. That's a common expression now. I hear it a lot, go hard. And actually, there's something positive, but also something very unhelpful about that. So it's very good to notice these things and to question them. And question them in yourself and to talk about them with others. So to the degree that we're working on these things in ourselves, it makes us more effective in our ability to communicate clearly and cleanly